Hello, my lovelies. Welcome back to Findmypast from home. It is time for Fridays Live. My name is Ellie. I'm Senior Community Executive at Findmypast, and we do Fridays Live every single Friday because at Findmypast, we release new records every single Friday. So we like to talk about them, and it's a really good chance for us all to come together at the end of a busy week of family tree research and just have a bit of a chat, really. It's a nice wind down into the weekend, a chance for us all to connect and celebrate our wins, talk about our challenges, help each other out. It's one of my favourite times of the week, actually. I'm always really glad when I get to do one of these. I feel like it's been a while, though, so apologies if I am a little bit rusty. Please say hello in the comments. Tell us where you're tuning in from today. Tell us what the weather's like with you. Tell us what you've been working on this week in terms of your family tree, or maybe you've been doing a spot of house history. Maybe you've been doing somebody else's family tree, for example. I want to know it all. We have got the lovely Daisy with us in the comments with us today, so please do say hello to Daisy. Let's welcome a few of you, shall we? Because I can see the comments coming in thick and fast, which is great. I'm not very good at accents. I will never say that ever again. So we've got Roz joining us from a sunny Massachusetts. We've got Rosie. Hi, Rosie. We've got Ellen in sunny Illinois. Do you know, it's actually brightening up here a little bit in Edinburgh, which I'm so glad of, because this is actually my favourite time of year in Scotland. Just when we get that sort of late spring, early summer, it is my ideal weather because it's sunny. You can go out without a coat on, but you're not boiling hot, because I don't do very well in the heat. I also don't do very well in the ice cold either. So this is my ideal sort of temperature. Yes, lots of you here, which is so nice. Lovely to see so many familiar names and faces. Hi, Jane. We've got Karen joining us from a hot and sunny North London. James joining us from California. Oh, California. I've never been, but I would quite like to go. Maybe we can just have a big meetup over in California, James, and we'll just all come and stay with you. Does that sound good? I'm only half joking. Shirley says it's a beautiful day in South Cambridgeshire. Been fighting the weeds all week. I don't have a garden of my own. We have a shared garden in our flat here in Edinburgh, and one of my neighbours does look after it very well, but I would love a garden of my own to fight some weeds, actually. I would really like that. Robert joining us from a clear blue sky day in Dorset. Very nice. I was down that way in April for a wedding, in fact. Excuse me, frog in my throat. Sue joining us because Facebook is acting up. Silly Facebook. The gremlins are out to play today. Karen says, I've been out for a late birthday lunch with my sister. Started the day with a visit to Sir John Soane's Museum in Lincoln's Inn. Very quirky. That sounds fantastic. That sounds like a great day. I would so be on board for that. Jeff joining us from a lovely Devon. Found a possible photo of my great-grandfather on a website for brass bands, Uxbridge and Hillingdon, excuse me. Fantastic. Lovely to hear this. Okay, so what are we going to do this week then? So I've got a bit of a special edition of Fridays Live for you this week. So we're going to do what we normally do and look at the new records, because if you didn't hear already, it's been a pretty big week for family history records here at Findmypast, and we're very excited. So we'll do that. We'll do question of the week. I'll just pop the question of the week up in case you haven't had a think yet. Please pop all of these into the comments. What prompted you to start your family history research? This is what I want to know today. And it ties into what we're going to be doing in the second half of today's session. So I actually have a special guest joining us today. So we have a musician called Joe, who has been on a bit of a journey to discover more about his father's hidden past. He's been using family history records to piece all of this together. He has a video series over on YouTube which details his entire journey, and he's going to share a little bit of that with you today. I'm so excited. So he's going to be joining us in about half an hour's time. So yeah, that's what we're going to do today. So keep those questions of the week coming in, and yeah, I think we'll just get cracking. So we've got a lot to cover today. So we're going to do new records, and I have a lot to cover with the new records as well this week. as I said, it's been a bit of a bumper week for new records. We have updates to one collection and then two brand new ones. So we've got updates to our Manchester rate books. We've got the new Browse version, and then we've also got a new record collection, which is Oldham Inquisitions. For newspapers, we've got 4 new titles. 3 of them are from Manchester themselves, and then we've got updates to more as well. So I'm just going to dive right in because these are such fantastic records. I've been having a play around with them since they've been on Findmypast, and these are great. So we've added an incredible 4.9 million records into this collection just this week, and it takes the collection to 13 million. It's one of our biggest record collections on Findmypast. It is fantastic. So if you have ancestors or relations from the Greater Manchester area, this is going to be a collection you're going to want to check. So they cover the Greater Manchester area. You've got Manchester, Salford, Trafford, Wigan, Bolton, Stockport, Rochdale, and Tameside. Now, they cover the 1790s up to the 1940s, but the bulk of what's available are for the 19th century and early 20th centuries. These are exclusive to Findmypast, and these have been brought online in partnership with Greater Manchester Archives. So we are utterly delighted to have these records. And I'm sure you might be thinking, well, why on earth are they important? Why would I even bother going to check out these records? Well, I will tell you. So as you probably all know, we only get censuses once every 10 years. So these can help bridge that gap and help you build that bigger picture of your ancestors' life. It can help you follow them around. You can pinpoint addresses for them, things like that. They help capture a specific moment in time for them. So if you're creating a timeline for your ancestor and you've got in 1891 they were here, in 1901 they were here, but in 1906 they were here, for example, it helps build up that bigger picture. They're also really handy for house history too. So you can see what house your ancestor was occupying. But because you get the distinction between owners and occupiers for these addresses, you can see who owned the property, but also who lived in the property, who occupied it. I see a lot of people saying for house history, for example, that they know who lived in their house because they have the deeds. That's all very well and good, but the deeds only detail the owners. They don't detail the occupiers. And these are exactly the kind of records that will help you with that. What is a rate book, though? I mean, I must admit, when I first joined Findmypast, I had no idea what a rate book was. It is basically a book of their yearly records that were for the owners and occupiers of properties and the amount of rate that was paid. Now, rate is basically just another word for tax. I often like to think of these rates as a precursor to council tax, as we would pay today, because the money goes towards keeping up local services. So things like the upkeep of churches, the water supply, jails, roads, hospitals, and also poor relief. And if you see poor rate on any of these records, it means that the person was paying their poor rate, okay? Because the occupiers, anybody who was paying these rates, they were eligible to vote on the committee who oversaw the distribution of the poor relief. In terms of what you can find, quite a lot of detail, actually. You get original images with these as well, which is always a bonus. So you get the name of the occupier, which is normally the head of the household. And I have seen instances where you've got the man as the head of the household to begin with, and then when he dies, you then get the woman, the wife, is the head of the household. You get the name of the owner of the property. There's a short description of what type of property it is, whether it's a house, a business, a flat, for example. I've seen examples of people who start off in houses and then end up, as time goes by, sort of into the 30s and 40s, they end up in flats. The street address, you also get the rate or the tax to be paid, whether it's the poor rate or the water rate, for example, the amount of tax that they've paid, whether there's any default on the payment and the date that it's been paid. And typically we've digitized every 5th year. So for example, 1901 and 1906, and that is to coincide with the census years. And what's quite good about these as well is you can cross-reference them with other records. You can use our address search to cross-reference with the census records and also 1939 register, perhaps a little bit later as well. You can even use newspapers, you can use electoral registers. There's a number of different ways that you can use these. So we actually did a little bit of digging to find some notable people in these records to show you a little bit about what they're like. So this is suffragette leader Emmeline Pankhurst. She appears in the rate books for 1898 to 1900 at the address of 62 Nelson Street. And we can see here that it was owned by a chap called J.M. Bennett. She's also at the same address, and this is an example of how you can cross-reference, in the 1901 census, and you can see her there with her children, and she's listed as a registrar of births and deaths. Which leads me very nicely into my next example. Do you remember the episode of Who Do You Think You Are with Michelle Keegan, about how Emmeline Pankhurst registered the birth of her great-grandmother, Nora Kerwin, in 1904? Hopefully I'm ringing a little bit of a bell, but at any rate, Nora's parents, so Michelle Keegan's two times great-grandparents, they appear in these records as well, which is really quite cool. So you've got Emmeline Pankhurst that appears, you've got them that appear, and of course Emmeline registered the birth of Michelle's great-grandmothers, which I just think is wonderful. So we've got the two times great-grandfather here, John Kerwin, who was at 1 Waterloo Grove. So her ancestors appear here too. And then one last example, you've also got Martin Lewis, everybody's favourite money expert. His maternal grandparents were Ephraim and Doris Tescuba. I'm probably mispronouncing that. We actually find them in the rate books in 1921, 26, 31, 36 and 41 at 3 Lord Street and later at 16 Central Road. And this is just an example of them here. There we go. Isn't that exciting? Please go and have a play around with these. Even if you don't have Manchester ancestors, they're really, really fun records and really, really good for house history, as I said. So we've also added, in addition to the index version, which you can search by name, etc., we've also added the browse version. So there's you can basically go in and you can search by your year, location, council, and an optional keyword rather than by name, because these aren't indexed. So you bring up the books and you can just browse through them as you would, browsing an online newspaper, for example. But these include some images that we haven't indexed yet, so it's well worth you going to check these as well. Next up, we have a brand new, slightly macabre collection, Oldham Inquisitions covering the years 1905 to 1917. There's 749 records that have been added into this, and these are records of investigation into deaths in Oldham. It's an index and it's designed to help you find an archive reference to lead you to the original. We do have original images, which is quite handy. And you should be able to find a corresponding death record. You could also order the certificate. There might even be more detail in the newspapers about a specific incident. So when I say inquisitions, I mean that if a death took place and it was unexplained or suspicious, the inquest would determine the facts and try and rule out any foul play, or if the death could be a cause for concern for the wider community, for example, in the instance of infectious disease. You might also find a corresponding crime record if it was determined that there was foul play at some point. So we've got transcript, we've got the original image, and you get lots of information on the original images, which is fantastic. I will just show you some of these, actually. This is just an example. This is a transcript from Minnie Fletcher. And if you go into the original, you typically get 4 pages per record. So you've got the date on here and the number. You've got inquisition taken on the view of the body of Minnie Fletcher. It gives the verdict. This is the front cover. And it says, died from fracture of left side of skull caused by being accidentally knocked down and run over by a milk float. very, very sad indeed, as Daisy's saying in the comments. Daisy, I know you've been looking at these records this week, and yeah, they make for some somber reading. Yeah, I think if you found one of your ancestors in here, it would be a bit of a moment to stop, and because it's so much more detail than you would get if you just ordered the death certificate, for example. And what's particularly interesting about these is they're quite formulaic. They follow this same formula. So you've got the second page here, and they fill out the dates and the names and things like that. And then you've got the witnesses, and they all sign it. So you've got a lot of signatures there, and the people who also gave the took part in the inquest. Water, excuse me. And then you get the witness statements. This one in particular is quite sad, but you do learn more detail about who Minnie was. So you learn that her mother was Ethel. You learn that she's 24. You learn that her husband is John. So that these are Minnie's parents. And you get her account of how Minnie died. It's really quite tragic to read. Oh, I've gone on too far. There was supposed to be another page there, but I have apparently forgotten to include it. But there's actually normally a fourth page as well, which is typically more witness statements. So yes, maybe check these out as well. Again, even if you don't have Manchester ancestors, or even Manchester ancestors or older ancestors who died in unexplained circumstances, they're still really interesting records. And I did actually find, this was the next, my next slide, I did actually find the family in the 1921 census, and they're living at the same address that was in the Inquisition record. And you've got you've got Jack, the son, who would have been alive at the time of Minnie's death. And they've since had another daughter called Ethel. And I just think it's so sad that Minnie doesn't appear here because of a tragic accident. But yeah, the more you know, I suppose. Okay, let's move on to newspapers then. So we have 3 new Manchester titles. We have the Altrincham, Bowden and Hale Guardian, the Ashton Herald, and then the Bolton Journal and Guardian. We've also got a new title from Lincolnshire. It's the Saturday Telegraph for Grimsby. It's 63,000 new pages in total added to the archive this week, and we've also got 9 updated titles as well. I think I included all the updated titles here. Yes, I did. So there's a nice little variety from across the country that you can go and check out there. I did just want to say as well before I'll just leave this up because we're going to do question of the week in a moment. We've added this incredible number of Manchester records this week, but there are a number of other pretty cool records that we have for Manchester, and it's always worth reminding people that we have these as well. So we've got so many incredible Manchester newspapers, including the Manchester Evening News, and we have a pretty hefty collection of pages and years for that title alone. We've got parish records that go back to the 16th century. We've got workhouse registers for 1800 to 1811. We've got prison registers. We've got cemetery records and burials and more besides. And then, of course, you can use the slightly more national record collections like the 1939 Register, 1921 Census and more. All of this together, you can take clues from all of these different record sets, and yeah, it's just you never use one in isolation, do you? You always go in and try and pull as much as you can, and then each little bit is a part of the puzzle. And isn't that the fun of it? Don't we love it? Okay, right, I'm going to have a quick look at the comments, and then we're going to do question of the week for the next 10 minutes or so, and then my guest should be here by that point, and I'm very, very excited to welcome him. Okay, I'm going to scroll back up and have a look at some of these comments. Oh, Daisy, you're starring question of the week answers for me. Thank you, Daisy. Please carry on doing that. Okay, Janet, question of the week. You started because you were trying to prove or disprove a family story about 4 ancestors being used as models for an oil painting. Oh, so half of it was true. Do you have the oil painting? do you have an image of it? Because I would really like to see it. I think that's so quirky as well. Like, I don't think anybody else will have that as a reason for starting their family history, because I think we all come in for slightly different reasons. They're all different triggers that we come in for. Like, I started mine because I started working for Findmypast, for example. But you could have started because, I don't know, maybe your first grandchild was born and it got you thinking about where you came from, for example, or maybe you learned that you were adopted, or there's so many different reasons why we start. So this is just what I'd like to hear about today, really. Sue says, I wanted to find out about the story that my Irish grandmother did take part in the Irish Easter Rising. And did she know Countess Markovich? Still no idea. I would love to know the answer to that, Sue. Keep going with that one. And if you ever find out, the first person that you're going to tell is... Yes, it's me. I'm joking. I want to be in like the top 10 though. The top 10. You can tell your family first. That's allowed. Then you come to me, okay? Because I'm invested. Christine says, 50 years ago, my mum told me that my Irish great-grandmother's maiden name was the same as my future husband's name, Carol. I wondered if there was a link somewhere. I found her mother and siblings living in Manchester, but not found anything in Dublin yet. I only seriously started looking 10 years ago. That's really intriguing. And just the fact that you've got Manchester as well, because you know where you're going to be going this weekend, don't you, Christine? You're going to be looking at the Manchester rate books and Oldham Inquisitions and the New Manchester newspapers. I've planned your weekend for you. That's it sorted. Georgia, let's have a look what Georgia says. I found my great-grandfather Walter Bright and his family on the 1901 census when it was first launched. I was so impressed. I just started looking for other ancestors, and the rest is history. Been over 20 years of researching my tree now. Yes, I think for quite a lot of us, the family history bug really, this is a terrible, horrible analogy, but family history got its claws into us and it's never quite let go. It will be something that most of us will do for the rest of our lives, I think. I can't imagine my life without family history now, I must admit. Actually, I don't know whether I should share this, but this week is my 7-year Findmypast anniversary. Because we as a company, we're quite good at marking employee milestones, and every week we look at who's got their various anniversaries, and this week is my 7 years at Findmypast. Where has the time gone? I couldn't tell you. Robert says, in 1990, I inherited old family photos from 1870 onwards from an aunt, and I felt like I had to find out who they all were. Downhill from there. Surely uphill from there, Robert. Have you managed to find out who they are? Whenever I go to my grandmother's house at the moment, she always seems to have photos lying around that I've never seen before, and immediately I'm putting them in front of her and I'm going, right, tell me who that is, please. Tell me who that is, please. And then I make notes. And I did say to her last time I was there, I said, please, if you leave me anything in your will, please just leave me all the family photos. I need those. I want to be the custodian of those. Kim says, I started off wanting to know more about my paternal side. I'm not going to try and pronounce that, Kim. I'm sorry. I lived up to their namesakes in the play, but it was my maternal side that I've spent the last 14 years captivated by. They're full of mysteries and murder and mayhem. Yes, Kim, I particularly enjoy your stories. They are, they put my own family tree to shame, because as dearly as I love my ancestors, I don't have anything half as interesting as what you find. So I'm just living vicariously through you, basically. Oh, so yes. Okay, right. Let's do a couple more. Ellen says, curiosity. My mum said she was Irish. Her mum's side is Irish, but her dad's side is deeply American, as in 400 years American, and mostly English. So much lost history. I love uncovering it. There is really something about that thrill of the chase with family history. You never quite know what you're going to find. I think you have to be prepared for anything if you go looking, but there is something very intriguing. It scratches that certain part of the brain that I can't quite explain it, but you all know what I mean. We all think the same with this. Um, Daphne says, I started because I was getting older with it, and with it comes questions, and I should have asked them when I was younger, but I wasn't the least bit interested at the time. I think yeah, that's certainly the case for many of us. I have one surviving grandparent, and I really wish I'd spoken to the other grandparents when I had the chance. And yeah, it's quite sad, really, but hey ho. I think many of us are in the same boat. A couple more. We've got Jane here. I knew very little about my father's family, and then I found his grandmother's Bible. She had had listed some births and marriages. I've told this story a couple of times, but there was an old family Bible in my dad's side of the family tree, and it was kept at my great aunt's house in Rhyl in North Wales, and it's right on the coast where her bungalow used to be, and it used to flood all the time because the flood defences were terrible. And unfortunately, the Bible got destroyed in a flood. But luckily, I think photocopies were made, so at least that is something. And we've got one more before I welcome on my guest. Sandy says, I started my family history in 1996 when my mum saw an advert on TV, and I asked if I could find out what happened to her father. He left the family in 1936 when my mum was 11. He was Henry Hall, born in 1898 in Newcastle upon Tyne. That's actually really fascinating because I have been working on a particular family tree this week, and that family are from the Newcastle area as well. So yeah, there we go. These are some great answers, guys. Thank you so much for sending those in. Keep them coming in, but what we're going to do now is welcome on our guest for today. I'm so excited about this, everybody. Can I get a thumbs up from you, Joe, that you're ready to come in? Yay! Okay, everybody, I'd really like to introduce Joe Jaquest of Hidden Roots. Hello, Joe.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor.
I'm delighted to have you
Appreciate
here
it.
and to talk all about your family history research, because in this community, we love family history, in case you
I
didn't
know I
already
was
know.
hearing.
So the reason we've asked Joe on today, everybody, is because he's been on a little bit of a journey, and I think you guys will all find it as fascinating as I have. And I've been asking you guys today, why did you start your family history research? What prompted you to do it? And the reason I've asked you that is because we all have something different to say. And Joe, maybe you'd like to introduce yourself to everybody. Tell us a bit about yourself and why you started your family history research.
Yeah, so my name is Joe. I am originally from Wolverhampton in the UK, the jewel of the West Midlands. I haven't lived there for a long time, but that was where I grew up with my mom and my dad. My dad sadly passed away in 2011, April 2011. And then it was interesting. I heard one of the people in the group say that they didn't think about starting their research until later because it didn't interest them that much when they were younger, and that was really the same for me. My dad was from Ghana, and I had sort of like a vague interest in Ghana and knowing more about where he came from and his family, but it was something that he really was very hesitant to talk about, and I never really knew why, but he was quite a closed person. So after a certain amount of time with your family, when they won't give something up willingly, you just kind of go, well, just let it be because we're not going to get anywhere here. And so that was very much the case. And then when my dad died, almost within days of him dying, I started finding out all these things about him that made it pretty clear to me that he was actually not a different person, but he was hiding aspects of himself throughout the time that he'd been alive. And all this stuff started to come to the surface in the days after he died. So I had to look after the probate when the death happened, and I had to look for certain documents like his original date of birth, his birth certificate and things like that. And I couldn't find a birth certificate, but I did find his original passport from Ghana. And it turned out, by looking in the passport from Ghana, that he was actually 10 years older than he'd always claimed that he was, which was a total shock. Also, his birthday wasn't his real birthday. We celebrated his birthday in November, but actually his birthday was in April. And then after a little bit more digging, I found a marriage certificate. It turned out my dad had been married to a woman completely unbeknown to the whole family the whole time that he was with my mom. And my mom and dad weren't really ever together. I don't really remember them, ever sharing the same bedroom or having a close relationship, but they brought me up together as best they could. And they were never married. But it turned out that he'd been married the whole time that they'd been together, and he'd never mentioned it to me or to her or to anybody. And then I also found this big box under his bed with a big photo album and letters and all these things that linked him to the people from his past, his family in Ghana, friends and things like that. But he hadn't left any names or addresses or any concrete way of getting in touch with those people. So I was just left with these bombshells about his life, about his age, about this wife, this mystery wife. And suddenly a window into this, his heritage and his family and his background, but no real way of actually interacting with those people. And that for me was the spark that made me want to look into my family history more, because suddenly I had all this family history that I didn't even know existed.
Yeah, how did you feel then? So I'm almost imagining you on your knees pulling this stuff from under your dad's bed and finding photographs and the passport. What was going through your mind at the time?
It was really strange. I guess like there were feelings of it's difficult because I was already in that grieving mindset, so everything is a little bit strange. And it's the first time I'd lost a parent. It's a very strange feeling for anyone that's been through that. The first time you lose a parent, it really like, it makes you realize that everybody's mortal. Like, you're having this whole there's a whole thing going on. I realize I'm mortal, like one day I will die. So there's all this stuff going on. But also then on top of all of that, having to deal with like a sense of betrayal, a sense that, maybe the person that I had imagined, this father figure in my life, was not the person that I thought he was, and trying to sort of come to terms with that, but also trying to get on with the process of getting a funeral arranged and, lots of
Yeah.
practical things to do. So it was a very messy time. It just all felt very messy. It was a lot of different emotions and feelings, all sort of like in a tumble dryer, basically. Generally
I
not
can
positive though. It wasn't, not good feelings.
I can appreciate that. I lost my father when I was 16,
Oh.
and although I don't think he led a second life, although
Mm.
we did always joke that he was a spy for MI6. Um,
You never know.
but I never went through what you went through in terms of um finding that there were things he kept from you. So I can appreciate that would have been very difficult. What
Mm.
happened next then? So you'd found all of this extra information about your father. Where how did you get from there to where you are now?
It was
What went on?
a long old time period, because I was pretty young. I wasn't as young as 16. I think I was 22 maybe when my dad died. And so yeah, I just moved down to London at that point. I just started to get into the music world, which is now what I do. I'm a singer, but I was just sort of breaking into that world at that point. So I was really trying to make a life for myself down in London, trying to establish myself in the music scene. So as much as I was dealing with the grief and also these other conflicting feelings of, who was this man, and all that kind of stuff, I was really focused on starting my life, my new life, like post uni. This was like the first big step that I was making. So for a long time, I wasn't able to do much with it at all, really, because things started to get, luckily, quite busy with work, and I was away a lot, and I was gigging, and I was doing tours and things like that. And in the back of my mind, I was always thinking about this stuff with my dad, but I didn't really know how I was going to get started on that journey. I didn't know, there's no one signposting, well, this is where you start to do this. And I had boxes and boxes of my dad's stuff, like papers and all kinds of stuff that was in storage, and just the sort of practicality of getting it all together and going through it with the spare couple of days. It just didn't happen for a long time. So the thing that actually was the impetus for me to really start the journey was the lockdown in 2020, when coronavirus hit. And as a singer, my busy schedule went from 100 to 0 overnight, and I wasn't able to do anything. Like, I was stuck at home. I'd actually been living in Berlin, but I was on tour in the UK when coronavirus really hit the UK. And by the time that tour was cancelled, Germany had closed its borders to the UK, which meant I couldn't get back to my apartment. So I just had my little travel suitcase that was only supposed to be for 3 weeks. I lived with that for 6 months in my friend's spare room, my friend's spare room in London, in Brixton. And yeah, so I was kind of just left alone with me, myself, and I. Like, there wasn't much out there. I didn't have material stuff. I didn't have my own home. I didn't have any work. And a lot of Netflix to start with, hell of a lot of Netflix. And then once I kind of watched about as much reruns of Friends as I could handle, I started thinking back to all that stuff with Dad and thinking, well, I've got a computer, I've got the internet, I've got a phone and I've got time. Now I've got time. So if I can't do this now, I'm never going to do it. So it became like my lockdown project. It was the thing that gave me a reason to get up in the morning. And then very quickly, it became a very addictive thing for me. And I was like, every little crumb had me like, yes. And I was sharing it with my friend that I was living with. And then it became like an obsession for her as well. Like, every day I give her an update on what else I'd found out that day. And it just became the thing that got me through at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that can be said for a lot of us, that
right.
Hobbies like family history were a little bit of a lifeline for us in that very, very bizarre, now blurry period of lockdown.
How can it have been nearly 3.5 years ago that it started? It's crazy.
Yeah. There's a lot of people in the comments who can sympathize, actually. So Kim says, my great-grandfather hid who he really was, except his children never got to know. It was only through DNA that I discovered the truth, 81 years after his death.
Wow.
Goodness me.
This thing, like, everyone has these stories. And I realized when I started sharing my story with friends, telling them what I was up to, I was amazed at how much people would open up about their own lives and their own stories. And it's such an honor and a privilege to for people to feel comfortable to do that. And it's great that you have this space where you guys all do it with each other anyway. But like, day to day, it's something that there's still a little bit, depending on what the issue is, depending on what the secrets are or whatever you discover, like, there can be a little bit of like the family wanting to keep that within the family, or a little bit of shame about some of these things. But it's great when people feel that they can open up, because everyone has a family history, and everyone's got something interesting going on there if you're able to take the time to look into it and see what's going on.
Absolutely. So what was your process for when you started your lockdown project then? So you had all this information that you'd already got. What tools were you using? What processes were you using? That sort of thing.
I think I was on Findmypast actually pretty early in that process, because I knew that I was going to need to look at records and things like that. And it was like records and stuff in my head. It was no more specific than that. I didn't even know what I was looking for, but I knew I didn't have very much. I was like, right, where can I go? Where are the sort of places that do this kind of thing? So one of the, I already had the marriage certificate, but by going on Findmypast, I was able to see that there was the record of the marriage was there, but there was no record of a divorce, which made me think, right, either my dad's wife had died and they never got the chance to divorce, or they hadn't divorced, so they were still married. So that kind of kept me going to keep on seeing if I could get in touch with her, because I was, well, clearly they haven't divorced, so there's something still to investigate there. But Google's also super helpful, obviously. Like, Google's your best friend with a lot of that stuff. And I had some small bits of information, like I knew where my dad had gone to school for a little while in the UK, So I went down a rabbit hole searching terms related to that college, and met some really interesting people through that. Like I found, so my dad went to this place called College Harlech in Wales, which doesn't exist anymore. It shut down quite a long time ago. But there was a guy with an old Vimeo page, and he posted lots of different stuff about Harlech, and a couple of them were about College Harlech, but there wasn't the sort of name of the game with his whole profile. But because I had so little to go on, I just by chance I messaged him and I was like, this is quite random. I'm trying to find some stuff out about my dad, and I saw that you had filmed some stuff about College Harlech. Do you know anyone, and can you help? And he was like, yeah. So he put me in touch with the old alumni association at the college, and then they were able to do some digging, and they actually found my dad's best friend who had been with him for like 2 or 3 years at college, and then they'd not seen each other for a little while. They'd seen each other again in the 80s and then disappeared out of each other's lives. But he was still alive and really keen to talk, so I was able to meet up with him through that initial random, checking someone's Vimeo page that had actually nothing to do with the college but knew the people. So it's just a constant, you're constantly finding new ways to maybe get a link. And I think the thing that was really important for me was like not having any shame about it and not being like, oh, it would be troubling this person. It's too much of a random possibility. A lot of the best connections and links that I got were from people where it was totally by chance. And I was just like, do you know anything? And they're like, actually, yeah, I do. I can help you out here. So it's just leaving that sort of, not ego at the door, but like leaving that timidity to not ask questions. Just go for it.
That very Britishness of, I don't want to impose.
Terribly sorry.
Cause a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
But actually, it's something that we in the community here, I think we've learned this, is that people are so helpful.
Yeah.
And they love to
help. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And the worst somebody can say is no. So if anybody wants to take inspiration from Joe's story, that is a great thing to take away from today. Just ask.
Go for it. Yeah, totally.
Ask.
Yeah.
So you're on this quest and you're looking at records and you're contacting College Harlech and your father's best friend. Throughout all of this then, what stood out to you as to what you found? What did you find on this journey?
So what were the main things that I was able to, well, I mean, the biggest step in the early stages was finding one of my cousins on my dad's side. So that took a really long time, but after a lot of digging and bothering a lot of people, I eventually got in touch with a guy, and basically someone had written an article for a Ghanaian publication, and it named the village that my dad was born in, but the author also had the second name that my dad used as well, and that I used. And this was after searching. It was like on the 50th page of Google or something. It was really hidden. And I managed to get the email address for that guy. I emailed him. He didn't know my dad, but he really wanted to help. He was really sort of touched by the fact that I, as like a second generation Ghanaian, was trying to get in touch with my Ghanaian roots and my family and stuff. So he really wanted to help. So he asked me to give any information that I had. So I gave him all the names, all the details of everything I'd found. And it turned out that he knew one of my cousins, and it was just by chance. So he got in touch with his cousin, John, my cousin John in Ghana, and then John got in touch with a cousin of mine who lives in London, and we were able to meet up and have a chat, and it was incredible. It was really, really incredible. But that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't kept pushing for it. But he was so great, and he was able to tell me so much about the family history, and he'd known Dad, so he was able to shed a bit of light on what Dad was like, and yeah, it was really, really eye-opening. And from that, I then went to Ghana at the beginning of this year for the first time ever. And I went and stayed with some family over there, and I got to meet a whole bunch of people. I went to the birth village that my dad came from. I saw the little hut that he was born in, and all the elders of the village and the locals all came down in like their finest clothes and put on a big ceremony for me.
I'm
And
gonna cry.
yeah, it was huge. It was crazy, and I didn't know any of this. This was all planned way in advance, and I didn't know any of it was going to happen. But it was a really big moment, and they made me an honorary sub chief of the village as well. So there was a little ceremony, and they dressed me up, and it was really, really incredible. It was a like a moment that is burnt into my memory for life now. But I was not expecting any of that to happen when I started this, this thing in the start of lockdown, that it would take me literally to the room that my dad was born in this isolated little village in the middle of, northern Ghana, and that all the, friends and family of the village would come down to welcome me with open arms. It was it was an amazing moment.
Yeah, that's pretty wonderful. I don't really have much else to say about it.
And I also managed to find my dad's wife as well. My dad's mystery wife. She also lives in Ghana. And while I was there, it was actually the very last day I was in Ghana. I was literally packing my bag, getting ready to go to the airport. And someone passed me a phone number. Someone in the family texted me a phone number and said, "We think this might be Irene." So I got in contact with her. But she lives like 2 hours outside of Accra, which is where I was. So I had to, very last minute, organize a lift, go straight to see her. We got 90 minutes together to have a chat. And it was a huge shock for her because she didn't even know that I existed. And then straight back to Accra to go to the airport to catch my flight. But we did manage to get a little sit down with each other. And that was another unexpected, amazing way to end that trip as well.
Yeah, I imagine that would have been, something like that could have the possibility to be quite awkward, but from the way you're saying, it was actually quite rewarding to be
it was
able
great.
to do that.
Ghanaian people are so friendly. Like within 10 minutes of meeting me, she's like, "Next time you come to Ghana, you've got to stay with me. Like you've always got a bedroom." And yeah, it's very, very sweet. And she genuinely meant it as well. So it was very, very nice.
That's really sweet.
Yeah.
And just in case, we've already talked about asking people and not being afraid to ask, basically. Yeah. But if any, during this journey, if you found yourself hitting that wall, we call it a brick wall in genealogy, when you get stuck, how did you cope when you came across these brick walls?
I think I would just take a breath, go and do something else for a bit, because it can feel very disappointing and defeating. But there's always another way. There's always another person. So I think it's just a case of going, okay, well, that was one line of inquiry that I was hoping was going to be the thing, but clearly it wasn't meant to be. So I'll go away from it. I'll go back to rewatching Friends on Netflix, because that's what I was doing, and then I'll come back tomorrow with fresh eyes and ears, and I'll try something else. Because for sure that happened to me a number of times. Like I thought I was really, really keen to find my dad's wife, and I was really struggling because I didn't have any links to her at all. Thought she might have been living in America. Turned out when I met her, she had been living in America, but she'd just come back to Ghana because of COVID and stuff like that. So I found the name of one of the witnesses who had been at the wedding through a lot of research, and I was convinced that this was the guy that was going to break the case wide open, because obviously he must have known them both if he was there. And I managed to get his email address, and he was working at a Cairo law firm. He was like in his 80s, but he was running this law firm. And so I sent him an email and didn't hear back, and then eventually heard back that he had died like 4 weeks earlier. So it was like, I was so close. It was so sad. And I was like, I was so close to this person. And I decided that was the only way I was going to be able to find Irene. And I was like, well, that's it now. There's going to be no way. And I had to take a step back and go, no, there'll be another way. And there was, because we met. So like, there's always another way.
I think your positivity is so inspiring.
Thank you. I try.
So if anybody watching today or watching back on Catch Up is in a similar situation to what you were in, where they have a relative who seems to have had a secret life. What advice would you have for them?
If you want to look into that, then just do it. Like, I think I put it off for a long time, and I wish that I hadn't. The time between realizing realizing the things that my dad had said and maybe not being all that true. So like finding the marriage certificate, finding the passport and stuff like that, and me actually doing the research was about 8 years, I think. Like, I got on with other things. But if I'd started earlier, I might have been able to find some of my dad's brothers and sisters, because he was one of 13 brothers and sisters. And I was really hoping to meet one of them, because they would have known him as a kid and they would have grown up with him, and that would have been a really amazing thing. By the time I managed to find my cousin in London, they'd all died, all of them. And a couple of them had been quite recent. And I just thought, if I just started a little bit earlier. And, you start when you start. But if you've got the opportunity to do it now, just start now. I think that's it. It's just a case of, it's the same with so many things in life. It's stop thinking about it and just do it. Yeah. You don't know until you try. And it might be that you start looking and you realize, you think, maybe I don't want to look any further, and that's fine. But if you don't start, you'll never know.
Wise words.
From someone who's done it.
So how do you feel now then, after this 8-year journey?
I'm in a good place now. I'm in a much better place with my relationship with my dad, in terms of how I feel about him, because there was a lot of time where there was like unresolved anger and resentment, and all these sort of mixed up feelings, and I was blaming him in certain ways for actions that he'd had and things that he'd done. But the more, I guess, as I've got older, but also the more I've looked into his life, and it's really humanized him for me more. He's not just a father figure. He wasn't just my dad. He was a person who had his own feelings, his own insecurities, his own failures, and he was just trying the best he could, like anyone else was. And so just for me to sort of come away with it and go, well, I don't have those negative feelings towards my dad anymore. I actually have a real sense of empathy and understanding. It's been totally worth it just for that. But also to be able to have this much bigger family now. And I'm constantly getting calls from them. Ghanaians love to call. So like, I'm constantly having to chat to people and stuff, which is so nice. So like, my family feels a lot bigger than it was in the past as well. So it's been like an overall, like a hugely positive experience for me. So yeah, I'm just really glad that I started when I did. Just wish I'd done it a little sooner.
It sounds like it's been very cathartic and
Definitely,
healing in a way.
Yeah. I would say so. Yeah, for sure.
I think family history does have the power to do that. It has the power to shock us as well at times. It has the power to upset us, but it can bring that little bit of extra closure that you might need in certain circumstances, I think. Yeah. Are you working on anything else at the moment? Are you doing family history? You said you're a musician. What's happening with that?
Yeah, it's funny, actually. I just put out my first single ever today, which is very exciting for me. So yeah, my first single, Ritual, came out today on Spotify and places like that. So that's been really exciting. I've been working on that for a long time. So that's like the fruit of a lot of labor, and there's a few more singles coming out after that. And then I'll be working on a second series. So I did a YouTube series, which I think you said at the beginning, about this whole journey. But that was from the point of finding out what my dad had been hiding, up to the point of meeting my cousin Edward in London. But then when I went to Ghana, I filmed everything again. So I'm going to do a second series, which is about going out to Ghana, meeting the family and everything that I discovered over there. So I'm starting the editing. It took a long time, so it's going to take a while, but I'm editing for that second series, and just putting out some more music.
Amazing. I can't wait for the second series. I can't now.
I'll go as fast as I can.
sneak previews to send them this way.
Of course.
It has been a real pleasure
Likewise,
chatting
thank
to you
you.
today. Of course, I've already watched all the videos, but just hearing you talk about your story to me and to the community has been a real privilege. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, it's been lovely, and there's been so many lovely comments as well. Kim saying finding out my ancestors' lives and their secrets has made me feel a bit more complete as a person and stopped me from making the same mistakes.
Interesting.
Victoria says congratulations on your single. Are you going to sing a couple of lines for us?
You put me on the spot now. So I've got a cold as well, but the okay, let me tell you that. Sacred. Not just something precious, this is sacred. We don't have to be too complicated. All we need is here right now. Now. But I'll wait, you have to I'll send you a link to the single so you can listen to it properly, because I'm so bunged up at the minute. It's not the way you'd want to hear it. But I thought I'd do something.
It's funny because one of my old colleagues, Alex, he used to always come on Findmypast from home and host these sorts of things. And the community always used to ask, "Come on, Alex, get your guitar out and do a bit of a song for us." And I think he did do on his last episode. He did actually sing. But yes, the community love it when people sing. So
it's quite a musical space then. Great.
Yes, Ellen says it's an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing. Daisy, would you mind just popping a link to the YouTube series in the comments for me again, please? Victoria says it's so lovely to hear that you had a warm welcome in Ghana. Roz says fascinating story. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, basically fantastic. Thank you so much.
That's nice comments as well. And yeah, it's great. I love that this community exists. It's really nice to know that things like this are happening, where people are sharing their stories and encouraging each other. I think it's a super positive thing. So it's great that you guys are all so involved in it.
It's been lovely having you here today. Before we wrap up, everybody, a couple of housekeeping bits for next week. So next week on Tuesday, it was going to be Wednesday, but she's busy on Wednesday. So Tuesday at 4 o'clock, I'm welcoming back Jessamy Carlson from the National Archives for our second brick wall busting session. So we have been tackling some more of your brick walls, and we are going to deliver our findings. So 4 o'clock UK time Tuesday, that's the 30th, I think, if I'm not mixing up my dates. And then Friday's live next week, it should be Rose hosting. So be sure to tune back in for that. And of course, go and have a look at all the new Manchester records, because they are amazing. If I haven't convinced you already, I'm going to try and convince you again. Go and have a look. They're really cool. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. I hope you have a lovely, restful, peaceful weekend filled with family history and all the other goodness. Joe, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Take care, everybody.
I'll send you a link to the Spotify, just in case anyone wants to have a listen to the version without the cold.
Thank you, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.